Hey, world, what up? There's been a bounty on Kyrie Irving's head ever since he came back from the Brooklyn Nets after his episodes of pretty much being gone for around 2 weeks or so. For the first two games of the James Harden trade with him and Kevin Durant as a dynamic duo, they've won both of the games against the Orlando Magic by 7 points and by the Milwaukee Bucks by 2 points. As we've seen the new Brooklyn Nets with just James Harden and Kevin Durant, they've been ideal dynamic duo. They both are ISO players that really don't like to play in a team system, but they pretty much want to play ISO basketball together, and they're the two best in the league. So ideally, they've been a great match. They pass the ball around. They've been able to get other people going with an assist. But basically with these two, they will give you 30 a night easy. And we've seen that. James Harden had a 30-point triple-double his first outing. Kevin Durant scored 40 points. And then the next following game, James Harden will still give you 30. Same thing with KD. Now, the next following game, we finally saw the news of Kyrie Irving finally coming back to the Brooklyn Nets to have his debut against the Cleveland Cavaliers. This was the team Kyrie Irving won a championship with his first 7 seasons with Cleveland. And within this outing, this was a double overtime game to where the Cleveland Cavaliers put up 147 points while the Brooklyn Nets took a 12-point loss in double overtime. Now, when it came to this game, the main name that's been out there that pretty much got MVP of this game is no one other than Colin Sexton. He gave you 38 minutes, and within that, he dropped 42 points on Kyrie Irving. Colin Sexton's wearing number 2, and he was rocking out some Kyrie, so put it up in Kyrie Irving's face within the team. Basically, there's been a hit on Kyrie Irving ever since he pretty much threw around 28 shots within that game. He did score 37 points, but he was a negative rating overall. And James Harden pretty much only shot 14 points that game. He had to be more of an assist maker. And within that, he had to let Kyrie Irving do his thing. Because when it comes to Kyrie Irving, he does not like the word sacrifice. We can go a little further back into the Boston era to where you had a bunch of young cats of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and you brought in Gordon Hayward. Kyrie Irving did not sacrifice whatsoever. He's been so used to a toxic LeBron in his second stint in Cleveland to where that's rubbed off on Kyrie Irving. And Kyrie, we really saw that same toxicity went into the Boston Celtics and then his first season with the Brooklyn Nets. Now, this is to be determined to see how things work out with him, KD, and James Harden. But we'll go a little more deeper into that. Kevin Durant still gave you that usual 38 points or so. So KD is going to give you buckets out there. But the real issue is Kyrie Irving and James Harden coexisting together. We'll jump a little further into here and we'll get it in.
Speak for yourself. Marcel Swally, Emmanuel Acho in the building. Let's get to the NBA. Well, Kyrie Irving was back in the Nets lineup last night after missing 7 games. Brooklyn's big three of Kyrie, KD, James Harden combined for nearly 100 points, but it was not enough. Colin Sexton dropped 42 points, including 15 in the second overtime for the win. The Nets took the L, but I was wondering, hey, Kyrie, how was your first game back, big dog?
Honestly, too long. Just 2 OTs for the first game back. Man, hey, you gotta love NBA basketball, bro.
You know, we're still early in this process. It's only game 1 for all of us, so we got a long way to go, but we're still excited about everything that's going on.
This journey together is going to be fun. You know, it was a tough first start, and especially it was an up and down game for us. But you know, I like where we are.
The personality of the makeup of this team is not ideal. We've kind of seen this whenever it was with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. Now that team is more formidable, more of an alpha personality and demeanor of those Golden State Warriors. So basically, Steph Curry was the best player on the team, but Draymond Green was more of the outspoken alpha dog. Steph Curry was more of a calming presence of an alpha, and then Klay Thompson was a killer out there. When it comes to these Brooklyn Nets, they're not based on a team system. These are based on pretty much street ball players, ISO players, and all-stars. So with the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry was the only true star player on that team. Klay and Dre were pretty much drafted players later in the draft where they grew themselves and they didn't have high egos entering in. When you have James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving, but all these players have played on championship contending teams, somewhere in that mix, they've been all-stars, they have high egos. And within this, None of these true players are true alpha dogs. Starting with number 1, Kevin Durant. He's always been a beta. Now, his game is more of an alpha presence, but overall with his demeanor, he is not outspoken. He does not like to take the lead. He likes to follow. For example, when he joined the Warriors, who were 73-9. Kyrie Irving, he thinks he's an alpha. His game does not resemble it. He cannot be a number 1 option for your team to win a championship. To be a number 2 option, maybe. But now he's more formed into a number 3 option, but Kyrie Irving doesn't know it yet, and he doesn't want to accept it. He wants to be, if anything, a second option, but in reality, he has to be the number 3 guy for the Nets. But he has the most outspoken alpha mentality and alpha persona. But when it comes to it, he still brings in toxicity and chaos. Kind of the things he kind of learned with LeBron James back in his second stint with Cleveland. We can go a little more deeper in a bit. And then you have James Harden, who's been a number 1 guy who can take your team far in the playoffs and be an impact franchise player. James Harden has never missed the playoffs in his career. Even when Dwight Howard was out into the 2015 season, James Harden got the Houston Rockets to a 2nd seed, right behind the Golden State Warriors. So when it comes to Harden, he's not known as to be a true leader. If you play in his system, he can take you far. But now you have 3 of these players you got to mix together. And Steve Nash, as of right now, he was letting them pretty much figure out as themselves. But Kyrie Irving needs to understand he cannot be the number 1 or number 2 guy. He cannot give you 30 shots a night. And the only person who really sacrificed that game was James Harden. Because within James Harden, the first half or so, he only shot around, I believe it was only just a few shots, barely anything to be in general. Kyrie Irving was being ball dominant. So this team's really got to figure out their roles and how they're going to pick out the rotations. I'll go a little more deeper into that in this video.
Harden finally got to wear that bomber he bought his rookie year in OKC again. All right, we're joined now by Fox NBA analyst Slick Rick the Bucher. But Acho, is the Nets lost to the Cavs something or nada?
I'll say it's more of nothing to something. So number 1, the Cleveland Cavaliers are one of the worst teams offensively in the league. They're ranked 29th. And with Cleveland, Kevin Love is out within this game. Darius Garland was not playing at all whatsoever. So Colin Sexton really rose up to the occasion and balled out. And with the Brooklyn Nets, they need more bigs on their team. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a tremendous amount of bigs. You have Andre Drummond. You had Kevin Love before. You have Thon Maker. You have Jarrett Allen now. So they got an enormous amount of bigs. And you got JaVale McGee. So if I'm the Brooklyn Nets right now, I'm looking to make a trade or a quick call to get JaVale McGee on my team ASAP. If you can't get JaVale McGee, if you're looking into free agency, you can get Jordan Bell, Tyson Chandler. Heck, may even call up Zach Randolph and bring him on the team. I know he would come out of retirement for that. But the Brooklyn Nets really need to address their bigs. That's one of the issues. The Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the worst offensive teams. And if you're the big 3 for your debut, and you let the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the worst offensive teams, pull up 147 points and take you to double overtime, that is not a good look at all. That's not good whatsoever. And this is more, I'm putting this more on Kyrie Irving than anybody else. Because Kyrie Irving, after 2 to 3 weeks of seeing James Harden and Kevin Durant on the team, seeing things from a wider perspective, from a further perspective, looking inside, Kyrie Irving should realize he needs to be the number 3 guy. He needs to step back and he needs to let James Harden and Kevin Durant be the main dynamic duo and the main dogs. But Kyrie has a high ego. He doesn't want that to happen. Kyrie Irving would rather retire than to leave the team and get traded or be a number 3 guy.
It's absolutely something. And the reason it's something is it's confirming all the doubts and the questions that we already had. See, Sel, what did we say about these Nets? What were our worries? What were our concerns?
What did you say?
We thought that, wait a second, will they really mesh? Like, who's going to take the shots? Where are Kyrie's shots going to come from? All of a sudden, Kyrie, 28 shots. KD, 25. James Harden, 14. That's the same.
And James Harden was the only one who took a step of sacrifice. Kyrie did not. For him to put up 28 points with his first game coming back is ridiculous. I'm not going to put too much on Steve Nash's first game because he wants them to get out and get going. But when it comes to your rotations, you need to limit James Harden and Kyrie Irving coexisting together. You don't need that to happen. Of course, you're going to start all 3. None of them are going to come off the bench. Start all 3. And what I would do pretty much in my position, when you start all 3, You let James Harden run the point. Kyrie would be the 2, main scorer. Same thing with Kevin Durant. And I would pull Kyrie Irving early within the game. So Kyrie Irving's happy because he's going to be starting. He's going to give you 35 minutes a night. Pull Kyrie Irving early from the first quarter. Let James Harden and Kevin Durant do their thing. And then whenever later in the first quarter, with around 3 minutes left, you put Kyrie Irving back in the game, and he runs with the second unit entering the second quarter, to where all he can just go out there is just to go out and score, kind of like a 6-man role. If you're Steve Nash, you need to orchestrate an offense and a rotation based on that demeanor. You cannot have James Harden and Kyrie coexisting more than 95% of the time. They need to play together around 5 to 8% in the beginning of the game and then at the very end of the fourth quarter.
James Harden, in his first 2 starts in the debut with the new team, 5th all-time in NBA history with most points in your first 2 starts with a new team. That same James Harden took half as many shots as Kyrie. Okay, what else were we concerned about? We were concerned about the Nets' inability to play defense. And the Cavs, which have the worst offense in the league, scored the most points in the league. So the 2 things that we were primarily concerned about with this Nets team were confirmed for us on day 1. Had the Nets lost in a slugfest, 83-67, just an ugly game, I would have tossed that out the window. I would have been like, Marcel, this is nothing. I ain't reading into that. Had the Nets lost, 99-101, a buzzer beater last second by Sexton, as nothing. It happens. Not a big deal. But
real quick, with the Brooklyn Nets, when it was Harden and KD the first 2 games against the Magic and Bucks, those were very close games within that, both of those games, very close. It came down to the fourth quarter, some of the last possessions. The Nets pulled it out at the very end. But now within this game, it was the same thing. Same thing with the fourth quarter and in overtime. But the Nets could not close it out. And you had Kyrie Irving at the very end of the fourth quarter when he got the offensive foul against Colin Sexton, it overturned, and Kevin Durant missed the game winner. It comes to those situations like that, Kyrie Irving needs to realize and understand he's too dominant of a toxic personality. He needs to tone it down a bit, humble himself, and realize that Kevin Durant and James Harden need to be those guys over him. They need to get more Kevin Durant and James Harden in the clutch. Now, if you're Kevin Durant, you've missed around the last 2 to 3 game winners in the past couple of games. That's not a good look. Especially when Kyrie Irving was throwing that shot at LeBron, stating that Kevin Durant's that mofo that can hit one of those shots. One of the only guys in this team in history. But hey, they'll go in. They'll go in on that.
the Nets lost in the exact manner that we predicted they might struggle with because of this combination. Now, I'm not going to act like the sky is falling. You lost a regular season game in January. But what are the indications of what that loss means long term? That's why I think it's something.
Oh, you know me. I don't think anything of this. This is nothing. How about negative nothing? Is that a thing? Less than nothing. I mean, what the hell are we doing right here, guys? One, if you watched the game yesterday, like we all didn't, it was a slugfest. No, watching the game, it was a slugfest. Brooklyn comes out in the first quarter up double digits. Like, all of a sudden, they took the foot off the gas. Like, these dudes is crumbs. Even though Cleveland is not crumbs necessarily, and I'll get into that. So, is this a slugfest, Acho? I love you, big dog. At the end of regular time, we're tied. At the end of the first overtime, guess what? We're tied again. And then finally, yo, I'm tired, boss. and Sexton went off and obviously goes 4 for 4 in the second overtime, and they win that game. I think what happens in this situation is everyone, like Acho was doing, is doing the confirmation bias, because there's only two sides you can look at this as. The side I'm on, which is like, yo, they have so much firepower that there's no way that this can go wrong, or the side that Acho's on, which is basically, how's this going to work out? Because you already see who gets the shots, who's deferring, et cetera, et cetera.
And like I stated before the James Harden trade went down with, my preference was and is, and it's justified now since you guys are seeing it, I've always stated, if James Harden's going to get traded to the Nets, it should just be a dynamic duo of James Harden and Kevin Durant. You can look to trade Kyrie Irving for better pieces, role players out there. But knowing Kyrie and Kevin Durant's relationship and team management and owners, they're not going to trade Kyrie. Let's be real with it. But ideally, James Harden and Kevin Durant alone would win you a championship easy. They would get to the finals easy. they'll win you at least one championship. But now you have Kyrie Irving, who's a strong personality, and this is something to where it's going to make James Harden and Kevin Durant uncomfortable if it's all three of them together. So you're going to have to try to make that work, and this is more going to be on Steve Nash's rotations. Because again, you need to limit Kyrie Irving and James Harden playing together. You need to limit it to around, at most, 8 minutes in a whole game. At most.
But let me remind you guys, one, their opponent last night, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're a 500 bunch. They're scrappy. They're not losers. They're a 500 team that has also beat the best team in the NBA this year by record, the Philadelphia 76ers, by 24 points in regular time. Whoa, you didn't see that one coming. So, one, why are y'all so upset at the Cleveland Cavaliers doing what they do, which is beat up the big dogs in their conference right now? But two, didn't I witness last year the champion Los Angeles Lakers in their first outing together lose to my Clippers? Yes, and how did that turn out? Obviously, well, because they became champions. So for me, this is nothing by just perspective, by the near history of the Los Angeles Lakers turning around from day one, and by the fact that they didn't lose to some bums. They lost to some dudes that smoked the best team by record.
And listen, I'll give some respect to Cleveland. They are at a 7-7 record in the Eastern Conference at 500. They're in the playoffs positioning as of right now. Do I expect this to continue? A little bit. I still don't expect them to make the playoffs, but they're surprising me, especially Colin Sexton and the crew. They do have an abundance amount of bigs. They may have to let go of one of them within a trade. Who knows about it, but that's their dominance. They're bigs, and you do have Colin Sexton. We'll wait for Darius Garland to come back so they can go back to quote-unquote Sexland. Pause. But whenever it comes down to it, the Brooklyn Nets right now have a 9-7 record. They are sitting at the 5th in the Eastern Conference. And when it comes to Brooklyn, finishing in the final playoff seedings, you do have the Philadelphia 76ers, who are quote-unquote top right now, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Indiana Pacers, and the Boston Celtics. So I expect more of the top four to be, in no order, the 76ers, the Bucks, the Celtics, and Nets. Those four are going to have to fight together to get into it. I expect the Brooklyn Nets to get things focused in. They'll adjust, and due to their star talent, they're going to win games just based off their star talent together. They do have 3 roster spots remaining, and they haven't addressed it yet. Later within the season, we're going to see more buyouts towards the trade deadline and around a month or two after that when we're nearing towards the playoff sides. So I expect for the Brooklyn Nets, if they're going to wait, that may be the case. If not, or actually if they do wait, they may want to wait until probably like a George Hill gets bought out, or, kind of players within those lines. If they're looking into free agency right now, they need to address bigs. They need another big on their team. You cannot just have DeAndre Jordan and then Jeff Green as your bigs. And Jeff Green has pretty much been a 3 or 4 in his career. So putting him as a 5 ever since last season, kind of suspect. But you need to bring in another big. Again, try to make a trade for JaVale McGee. Maybe try to make a trade to get Taj Gibson from the New York Knicks. If not that, again, try to go for Tyson Chandler, Jordan Bell, possibly even try to bring back Zach Randolph from free agency, retirement. And then for your wings, you're going to need another wing out there. The Brooklyn Nets right now, their bench is very suspect as it is. For example, Joe Harris, Landry Shamet are pretty much the 2 premier guys. Everything else is very suspect. So maybe bringing in Iman Shumpert, another wing on your team, and then 2 other bigs as of so far.
It is something, because the last time I checked, this is not Seinfeld. We only talk about things that are something. We don't talk about
good point,
nothing. And the optics in and of themselves are bad, because it's not that they lost. It's that they lost after James Harden and Kevin Durant found a way to beat the Milwaukee Bucks and the reigning MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then turn around, add Kyrie Irving to the equation, and lose to, as Acho said, the worst offensive team in the league. And the 22nd best team shooting the 3 went 20 for 40. It's also the fact that so many other things went right. the big three actually played well together. They shared the ball, 30 assists. They got the supporting cast involved. They won the rebounding battle. And I know, Marcellus, that you've said before, defense doesn't matter to you. The problem is it does not appear to matter to James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant either, because ultimately that's what cost them this game.
What's an embarrassment is the Cleveland Cavaliers are ranked 29th when it comes to offense, one of the worst. And on defense, they're one of the better teams. When it comes to the Brooklyn Nets, defensively, not good. When it comes to offense, the Brooklyn Nets are one of the top teams in the NBA. And for the Cleveland Cavaliers to score 147 points on you and you lose to them, very suspect. And that's not a good look to begin with. Now, I'll let it slide a little bit because Kyrie Irving just came back. And you have a lot of personalities that are trying to work themselves together within the first game. So, again, I'm not freaking out. This is kind of standard. We're going to forget about this game whenever they're in the playoffs or further down the road. So, nothing to talk about. It's just more of a hot topic as of right now.
And that's what we said was going to be a potential problem, that no matter how good they were offensively, that their defense wasn't going to be good enough to compensate.
Yeah, Slick, man. You went everywhere right there, and Slick, everywhere you went was right. It's something because Colin Sexton went out there and cooked on everybody, Sal.
Everybody.
On Kyrie, he went 6 for 10.
All y'all.
On James Harden, he went 4 for 4. On KD, he went 2 for 3. Kyrie, I don't care how many buckets you get. If the dude you guarding gets more buckets than you still fighting a losing battle. Harden, I don't care how many buckets you get. If the dude you guarding gets more buckets than you. But I actually watched that game last night because I was really intentional on what's up with these Nets. I can't come up here and talk about it if I don't watch.
Yeah.
Slick and Sell, this is when I was like, uh-oh, there might be a problem. Let's go back to the last 2 possessions of regulation. The second to last offensive possession for the Nets of regulation, I don't know if y'all recall, James Harden didn't pass the ball. Straight iso ball, James Harden shot. Last possession of regulation, I don't know if y'all recall, Kyrie didn't pass the ball. He gets the ball, 5 seconds left, KD like, ball. And Kyrie, dribble, shot. I'm looking at this game like, uh-oh, hold on now. The 2 most pivotal possessions in the game ended, so you ain't got to go to OT. The best player on the team doesn't get the ball. That's Kevin Durant. And there is absolutely no ball movement. We can excuse the last possession, if you will. 5 seconds left, a little bit of scramble, a little bit of chaos. But the second to last possession can't excuse. The last reason I'm going to say second lap I got issue with it is...
Well, real quick, all these guys have dominant personalities of wanting to score at the very end, ISO basketball. So, no shocker for me.
Kyrie, you're an incredibly talented player. One of the most talented players in the league. You're the 3rd best player on your team. So...
Thank you. Bingo. Kyrie Irving knows this. He realizes this, but he does not want to believe it. He wants to do anything possible to perform himself at a level of a second option to demean James Harden. And James Harden, coming into this game, he deferred. He does not want to have chaos and shaking. And we've already heard the rumblings of James Harden recently of people saying he's not a good teammate. He is selfish. He has an ego. So James Harden came into this game. He decided to defer. Was it his priority and was it something he wanted to do? No, but he understands he had to. And knowing this, he understands Kyrie Irving is not a consistent player at a high level daily basis for 2 things. Number 1, he is injury prone. And number 2, Kyrie Irving can give you 30 points one night, 28 the other, 40 the other, and then the next 2 games he'll give you 12 points and 18 points on 30% shooting. James Harden and Kevin Durant are the only consistent players when it comes to scoring 30 or more day-to-day basis. I fully expect Kevin Durant and James Harden will be the top 2 main guys, and Kyrie Irving will have to defer to them, and yes, he will understand to be. But it's probably going to take around a month or so for this to actually kick in and finally hit him deep down to accept.
Why, after 2 weeks of an absence, being the 3rd best player on your team, are you taking the most shots on your team? See, Kevin Durant has an NBA MVP award. James Harden has an NBA MVP award. So how you out shooting KD in your first game back?
And listen, this was not in the plans for Kyrie Irving when he decided to go to Brooklyn and team up with Kevin Durant. He knew he could win a championship, and that was in That was in the making for his legacy with Kevin Durant, but he expected to be the number 2 guy, if anything, a quote-unquote 1B in his mentality. He never expected James Harden to come join them. This ruins his plans whatsoever because Kyrie Irving wanted to be a number 1 guy, did not work out in Boston or Brooklyn. Now, he deferred by trying to be a number 2 guy to Kevin Durant, a more formidable option that plays better than him, than a LeBron James fit. And they could win a championship, would be good for his career. But since James Harden comes in, now Kyrie Irving cannot handle the pressure of deferring to a number 3 option on his resume. He won't accept it. It's going to take him a while to do so, but he cannot do that whatsoever.
You taking twice as many shots as Harden in your first game back. And also, I don't like reading too much into things, Slick, but I know you do, so I'm going to do it for I'm going to ride with you, Slick. I don't know if y'all saw the post-game presser. Who was the only player smiling after that loss? It wasn't KD. It wasn't Harden. It was Kyrie. Kyrie smiling after y'all lost because Kyrie got his sale. He got his buckets. KD done already got his in his career. He's trying to win. And James Harden is like, I only took 14 shots and I've been balling. I'm going to make a small issue out of it because eventually that molehill is going to become a mountain. You watch.
Do you?
And remember, Kyrie Irving has an NBA championship. Even though I say that James Harden should be a number 2 option over Kyrie and should be more ball dominant as a point guard, Kyrie Irving is quote-unquote delusional in his head. He has a championship, so he's using that excuse to justify himself as a number 2 option. Again, Kyrie Irving has not had a lot of time to digest this James Harden trade and roles, positions, and his future and career. Even though Kyrie was out for around those 2 weeks to digest everything, get things settled, it's still not enough time for him to adjust. And just coming off this game, for Kyrie Irving, putting up around 28 shots this game, trying to be the lead scorer, trying to get everything going, you can tell the desperation and what his mindset is. It's not a good look if you're Brooklyn right now. It's not a good look for James Harden. It's not a good look for Steve Nash. This is the moment where Steve Nash is going to have to jump in and really set up a game plan and a right rotation that fits these players together and limit James Harden and Kyrie Irving. They cannot coexist for more than 90% of the game. They can only coexist for around, at most, 8 to 10%.
Acho, there's another element that you pointed up here that I was going to bring up, but you added a piece to it, which is it's not just about the big 3. The shot selection at the end of the game and where they were going also points the spotlight on the coaching staff and what they were and how they were informing this team. The other element was that those big 3 played the last 18 minutes without a break. They were on the floor for 18 consecutive minutes. When else would we watch? Look, Acho and I, we're not watching Cavs versus Nets at this point in the season
Acho is.
Unless it meant something.
Yeah, well, Acho dating them old ladies, so you know.
Hey, we're going to end off here, but on a quick note,